Generations, Australian agriculture has been central to Australia's prosperity. It's our vision that it remains this way into the future. We know that the smartest and most innovative farmers are the ones that are actively engaged in business planning, using professional services to complement their operations at the right time. We are here to share the stories of some of the farmers that have used these services, and we will uncover the different ways farmers are building better businesses. Hello and welcome to the Department of Primary Industries Smart Farm Business webinar series. We're coming to you live from the Exchange in Dubbo, where we're joined by Dave Waters from the Rural Financial Counselling Service. Welcome, Dave.
Thanks for having me.
We're working with the Exchange and Humans of Agriculture to bring you a series of conversations about agriculture. We acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet, the Wiradjuri people, and pay our respect to elders past, present and emerging. We extend that respect to those Indigenous people watching online today, and we encourage you, wherever you are, to drop the traditional lands on which you are joining us from in the chat. In fact, if you would like to use the chat more frequently today, you are welcome to, because that interaction is excellent for other people watching online, and it's also a place for you to ask questions of our guest. So today we'll be discussing the Rural Financial Counselling Service, and we're joined by Dave Waters, who's part of the Rural Financial Counselling Service in the Central and the Southern region. Dave, people are going to want to know who you are and about your background that puts you in this important role working with farmers and ag-related businesses. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, I grew up sort of west of Dubbo here at Nevertire. And I guess how I where I started was I went to uni and I did a business degree, a commerce degree. And
what did you major in? Were you a finance guy?
Yeah, I did. I did management accounting and corporations law. And I think I did a business degree because I wasn't kind of sure what I wanted to do, but I figured that would be a good grounding for jumping off point. So once I finished my degree, I came back to the family farm and worked with my family. That was sort of early 2000s, and then after a couple of years, we were sort of probably middle of the way through the millennial drought. So I moved to Dubbo and got a job working for an accounting firm, and I worked several years for a local accounting firm, predominantly dealing with ag clients. And it was sort of through working there that, through a few contacts, that I started to learn a little bit more about the Rural Financial Counselling Service. So I sort of, by chance, a job came up as a locum Rural Financial Counsellor. I was in my sort of late 20s. And so, I applied for the job and I started working for the counselling service in about 2007. And I spent 3 years sort of travelling the Central West. Our area was the largest area. We sort of extended from Sunraysia in the southwest corner up to the Queensland border, and then back in towards Walgett and Canamble, back to Mudgee and Orange, Parks.
So as a locum, you did 3 years, town to town.
Yeah, no, it was a really great experience. Actually, I sort of got to see a lot of the state that I'd never seen before, and deal with farmers in a lot of different industries. And it was and I got to work also with a lot of counsellors who were really experienced, had been with the service since its sort of inception in the mid 80s. So I was lucky. I got to cherry pick, I guess, sort of the best ideas from these really experienced people. So it was a great learning curve for me, and a really great experience.
And so travelling from region to region, the industry changes.
Yeah,
so you don't have to be an expert in the industry. You don't have to be an expert in Wagyu cattle farming. You have to be an expert in what the Rural Financial Counselling Service provides. So what is that they provide?
Oh, I think it's always sort of maintained, like it's the fundamentals of it are we're free confidential sort of service for farmers and ag-related enterprises. Trying to help people understand their financial position, trying to help them, develop new ideas, new options, plan for business models, access to, whatever funding or incentive programs are out there, and genuinely just trying to be a support service in terms of financial management for the farming community. Yeah.
And is it rare to find a counsellor within the service that is really tied to agriculture, has a background in finance, has worked both as an accountant and worked as a farmer, and you're a farmer now in Mendooran?
Yeah. No,
is that rare, or are you one of many?
Look, we all have, once you start to, talk to the counsellors in different regions, we all come from different backgrounds. I've sort of this is my second time at the counselling service. So I went into agribusiness banking in about 2012. So I had 5 years with the counselling service, and then a few years in agri banking, and then was a full-time farmer after that, until sort of the end of the last drought. And then by chance I was talking to my old boss, and he said, would you come back in a part-time capacity? And I'm still here 4 years later. So
amazing.
But the other counsellors, there's such a varied background. Some people have an agronomy background, or banking or finance, or there's a lot of some people have social work background as well as the finance aspect. But there's a lot of us that are also farmers as well. There's quite a few counsellors that are live on farms and run their own farming enterprises. So
incredible that when people do decide to make a call to engage with the Rural Financial Counselling Service, that they are met by people who live out here, have a background and interest in farming, and also a skill set that is complementary, be it finance, agronomy, to running a great business.
Yeah. I think it helps that we are regionally based, that we're spread out through the community, that we're not just sort of centralised in one location. It gives you a better feel for what's happening in your local area. That it's if it hasn't rained, you're going through the same thing. So that sort of connection to community has always been really important and a really integral part of the success of the Rural Financial Counselling Service.
Now, I want to bust a myth really early in this webinar. The counselling service is not just for the down and out.
No, it's not. It is an important part of what we do. That we are there as a support for people in financial hardship, but it's not. You don't have to be in that sort of in that situation to access the service. A lot of the time, it's really beneficial for not only for the clients but for us as well, to have that early intervention or that early contact with somebody, so that we can sort of start that business planning or that financial sort of analysis, and starting to develop ideas about what direction do they want to go in, before sort of maybe problems arise. And that's a big win for us when we can connect with a client early and have that.
What's an example of someone who would use the service but didn't know they were eligible?
Look, I think that probably one of the things is, there's probably support services for agriculture, probably, contractors or people who have a farm but their main enterprise is contracting, and sort of think, well, it's just for farmers. And we do, offer services to that industry as well. I think also probably there's probably a bit of a misconception that, like you said, that we have to be down and out to talk to the counselling service. We're pretty flexible, and it's pretty broad ranging scope of what we can assist people with and how we can help them. So,
and without giving names, can you tell me about a recent client that you helped through the service? Yeah,
look, I've got a client at the moment that they've sort of been working with them for quite a while, but recently we helped them apply for some funding for infrastructure and development, which we've sort of in the process of getting approved and getting
What's
on
an
the ground.
example of infrastructure? Is that like water pipes for shops or cattle
yeah,
yards?
exactly.
Or?
Sort of fencing, cattle yards, grain, fodder storage, drought proofing. So
Right. So activities that make you more resilient, you can get
absolutely
government funding for.
Yeah. There's some great programs out there, and I think that's also part of connecting with the counselling service, is that it's hard to know what's available, whether you're eligible, and we can sort of help you find out what you might be able to what you might be entitled to.
So you could help a
can
farmer
access.
find the grant that might be applicable to them to get storage for feed for a drought, or maybe confinement feeding areas that make feeding in a drought more productive and efficient. So there's those sort of, you can almost do the finding so the farmer can do what they're good at.
Yeah, I think it comes down to that whole, when we start to work with somebody, we start to identify, things that we think that they might be eligible for. And then it's just having a conversation and letting them know what's available, how to access it, and we just go from there. It's not it's a pretty relaxed sort of relationship between clients and the Rural Financial Counsellors. We're lucky that we are a free service and we can take the time to get to know our clients. We're not sort of not conscious of the fact that of billable hours or anything like that. So
it sounds like a really genuine desire to help and an authentic service by people who live out here for people who live out here. Yeah,
I think that comes from that sort of having people in their local communities, and you get that sense of sort of really wanting to help. And and look, it's a really rewarding role too, in the fact that there's a lot of job satisfaction in helping people and in your community.
We might hear from some other people within your organisation. The central and southern region extends from Queensland down to the Victorian border. And while Dave's role sees him supporting farmers near his farm in Mendooran and in the Warrnambool region, we're going to hear from Susan Kelly and Kate Justin, who are based in the Dubbo and Mudgee area, and they're going to talk to the Rural Financial Counselling Service offerings that are available now.
I'm Kate Justin and I'm the Rural Financial Counsellor for the Dubbo and Mudgee areas. I grew up on my family property in Scone, and after university went into NAB agribusiness. I then went into different sections of the bank, but I really found that my passion was working with farmers. So I believe that my farming background as well as my banking experience led me to become a Rural Financial Counsellor, and really enjoy what I do.
I'm Susan Kelly. I'm the team leader for the Western region. The Rural Financial Counselling Service is a service that was put together to support farming families that are in hardship or at risk of hardship. Now it's also developed into a service that does assist small related enterprises. When the counselling service come into play, it was basically there to assist people that were dealing with the interest rate crisis that was happening in the 80s. Since then, it's working towards trying to make our farmers more resilient, assist them to plan better, long-term planning, succession planning. It's developed into quite a large service, and it's actually a nationwide service now.
We believe in a holistic approach and that all 4 pillars of the farming business are integrated. So we look at the business itself, the business owners, their current financial situation by analysing their financials and understanding where the business is at. We also look at future planning for the business and developing cash flow budgets, business plans, and setting goals for the future. We can also help with clients with conversations with creditors, farm debt mediation, succession planning, and also accessing government grants and funding.
In some of our service regions down towards Bega, we have oyster farmers, dairy farmers. We deal with large Western properties that are grain growers and graziers. It's a huge variation of clients.
When the farmer initially calls, we get an understanding of why they're calling, where they're at, and what we can provide for them. Essentially have an initial conversation before we sit down and meet and really start to get into the depth of their situation. I recently had a client come to the service. They were looking to integrate some new technologies into their business. We were able to Not only talk about the new technologies that they wanted, but have a look at their current financial position. And in those conversations and analysis of where they're at, we're able to identify other opportunities for the client, such as access to current grants available, and also refinancing some of their higher interest debts into a lower interest facility, which overall helped their cash flow situation and therefore helped them to expand their business and reach their financial goals.
I think it's actually really beneficial to start having those conversations, because that's where good ideas grow from.
Success is client driven. So for them to come and engage with us, they're really looking to help their business and get as much support and information for their business as possible. So it's important to be proactive in coming to us so that we can best review your situation and help create options for you early for the best outcomes. We're really keen to help our farmers and the success of their business, and always open for a conversation.
It was great to see Susan and Kate speaking about the service and the range of services they offer. I love the example that Kate gave about a client who came to them and said, I really want to implement some technology in my business. And they were able to help them navigate a grant, and also just making the decision, do I want to outlay this capital and spend the money? And what does that look like for the return on investment? I'm sort of keen to hear about any other examples of people who have come to you for support for those short one-off decisions that they make.
Yeah, we sort of it's quite funny that usually somebody might access the service or give you a call for a specific thing or information around funding projects or grants opportunities, and it kind of develops from there, and you might end up sort of identifying other options. I think Kate's example's pretty typical of the way that we interact with with farmers. You can start and it's just a phone call, and then 2 and 3 years later you've moved on from just that initial information, providing information, to working with business, a full business plan and pre-succession planning and things like that. So yeah, it often has humble beginnings and develops over time. I think that's probably one of the best things about the way that we work with clients, is that it's fairly informal. It can be tailored to the client's needs. We don't have a set sort of you must do this and you must do this. It's sort of there's no point in us going through cash flow budgeting and things like that. If the clients are already pretty financially literate, we can sort of move on to bigger ideas and bigger issues. But then there's also that scope and that room for working through from the grassroots and working with clients. I mean,
with the current climate, so we've got some areas are now back in drought.
Yep.
A little bit too soon for all of us to stomach after the last drought. We have a very sharp rise in interest rates, which we didn't expect to rise so quickly. What are people ringing the counselling service about at the moment?
Look, and to add to that as well, I think we've seen a pretty rapid decline in livestock prices over the last sort of 6 months as well. So it's definitely increased that inquiry about, we want to plan for the next 12 months. We want to stay on top of our financial situation. Can you help us sort of forecast and see what the next 12 months looks like? Are there any opportunities? And I guess in terms of service, getting probably more inquiry in the last few months around Regional Investment Corporation, which is a subsidy.
That's a loan?
Yeah, so it's a program. It's a federal program where people can sort of take half of their commercial borrowings up to capped at a certain amount, and refinance them to what's essentially a subsidised government loan, to try and improve cash flow and get some stability in terms of that.
That sounds appealing.
It does, yes.
Especially right now.
Yeah.
But there have been rumours that is a very slow process. What do you say to people who have heard that in the past?
I think, I think with anything that's that's finance related or debt related, there's a due diligence that needs to happen from those agencies. It can be a slow process. I think people need to, just be aware of the fact that if you are looking at this, looking at it in advance is probably the key, and being prepared to sort of, take the time for that application to go through. There's a lot of moving parts there when you add a second mortgagee and deeds of priority. So yeah, it's not as simple as probably a process, but it can be really beneficial and really add a lot of saving, and and that can either be reduce operating costs or be reinvested through other areas. So
must be very helpful for you having a background in accounting and agri-banking to then help someone through a process of refinancing to a lower interest rate under a federal program. It must be really comforting for them to sit with you and go through that process together.
Well, yeah, it's actually the banking. My time in agri-banking was it was really beneficial. Having an understanding of how credit processes work, how security arrangements work for mortgages has been really beneficial in sort of having that conversation with clients and actually being able to explain it from this is their side of it. These are the things that the bank and Regional Investment Corporation have to get organised before they can sort of we can get to funding or sign on the dotted line. But yeah.
I can see people watching this thinking, I want Dave. They think, ring. Well, I want Dave. What happens when someone rings for the first time, and who do they get?
Look, we because we're such a big network and regionally based. If somebody wasn't sure how to connect with their rural financial counsellor, we have a 1-800 number that's manned at all the times, and they will find out where you are, put you in touch with the nearest counsellor to you. So it's a pretty. I've had a lot of people over the years who've said to me, like, I've had your number sitting on the fridge for 6 months, and I just didn't know how to, what was the right time to call. And I'd say if there's anybody out there who's in that situation, just pick up the phone, make the call, and we'll go from there. It's pretty. It's pretty relaxed. We like to try to take the time to get to know people and for them to get to know us. There's got to be a relationship of trust there, so that and I think that's really important. That when you're working with somebody in these in these areas, yeah.
Well, to give people confidence of the quality, the calibre of counsellors who are across New South Wales, we should jump to one of our case studies. So we hit the road to Moree a couple of weeks ago, and we met with Bob from the Rural Financial Counselling Service. He has an equally impressive background, as do all our counsellors, and he's been working with farmers Ruth and Lyle on a couple of projects over a number of years, and we'll jump to that case study to have a look and hear from Bob, Ruth and Lyle.
The Rural Financial Counselling Service, so it's been around for 40 years around Moree. It was founded in the mid-80s, 1985, it was formalised. It's on the back of the 80s drought where some of the banks were pretty brutal in the way they went about handling some of their accounts. I did the rural counselling job 1999 to 2006. At that time there was about 20 rural counsellors in New South Wales. A quick look today sees there's probably around 70 or 80. And they're in all the other states as well. We're a free service. Most importantly, we're confidential and we're independent. So we do not liaise with anybody else other than ourselves.
I'm Ruth Ranger, and you're on Rosevale at the moment, our property. We've been on the farm for 38 years. It's over 100 years been in our family, so we're about the 4th generation now. I rang the Rural Financial Counselling Service for the first time when we were in a drought. I needed water forms to be filled in. If I asked our accountant, they would have cost me $1,000 to get filled in. They came out, we had a nice meal, the forms were done, they were emailed away, and we got our water grant through. And then we put 2 or 3 troughs in every paddock, and now we're drought proofed as far as water goes.
We're here to basically help farmers that find themselves in financial difficulty, but not necessarily, you could be in a reasonably good financial position, but are looking for some guidance, perhaps succession planning, which we can accommodate and facilitate.
Well, we had Bob out here, it was only about a month ago, and we talked about recession planning a lot. He gave us different ideas to think about. We're trying to work through that at the moment. I'm not just going to walk off the farm. I want to improve the land. I want to improve the fences for the next person. I want to leave my footprint on this place. We've sown 2,826 trees on this place and done 7 k's of fencing and 22 gates, so I'm not about to stop.
Just this week, I've had 3 new clients, and it's only very, very early days. They're looking to change, and they're just not quite sure which path to take. So my role would be to help them look at all the different options, perhaps a couple they haven't thought of, and they can research and discover them and just see which path they want it to take.
We've had Bob out here a few times. We've done future planning. With Bob's background in banking and things like that, it is absolutely fantastic to have him here. He has really talked into depth of how to do these sort of things. He really made sense of what was going on.
We're open to everybody and anybody, so we will determine afterwards whether you become a long-term client of the counselling service. You may just be a transactional client and just access government assistance. But you'll have a friendly phone conversation with your counsellor. We will help wherever we can, and we can work that out as we go along.
So another great case study. Bob's got a lot of experience, but then as a result of Bob's relationship with his clients, you know, it came in through, they rang up, they said, we want to fill out these forms to get some water pipes. Then they had troughs for drought proofing. Then it went on to planting trees, installing gates and new fences. Their relationship has grown from one phone call about a water application form.
It's pretty much deja vu. So I'd say if you spoke to all the counsellors, you know, that's how most of our client, you know, work starts, is with an inquiry that leads, you know, somewhere else, and you know, and through time, you know, working with them, you start to work on, you know, bigger picture ideas and things. Yeah, we're starting to see the nature of client work is, you know, it ebbs and flows and changes. We can act as a triage service in times of, you know, we've just been through some years of flooding, and we've, you know, provided sort of that short-term assistance for people to, you know, help with recovery. But then we've got other clients that are that we're, you know, starting to access the service through, that might not necessarily have a lot of debt. It might be a very, you know, mature business with, you know, in a fairly, you know, stable financial position, but there's a lot of uncertainty about the future. You know, recently I've had a few clients that with large properties, you know, relatively, yeah, little debt, but no clear, you know, plan for the future, and nervous about it. And there's...
Is that a plan, like a financial plan, a business plan, or a succession plan, or all 3?
It is probably all 3 at that point in time. I mean, we sort of, yeah, it's easier. I was thinking about, you know, our role as rural financial counsellors. It's probably easier to, you know, to identify what we can't do, which is, you know, legal advice, accounting and taxation advice, and when, you know, and social or family counselling. So we sort of we're there for that support service.
You're an additional professional service at the table.
Yeah,
with the accountant, with the lawyer, with the succession planning operators, or you can fulfil that role as well.
Look, we a lot of the time when people come to you know, to want to talk about succession planning, I often, you know, use the same analogy, is that it's like getting in a cab. Your accountant and your solicitor are driving, and you've got in the back seat. And if they ask you where you want to go and you don't know, you'll probably spend a fairly long time and a fairly expensive process of driving around until you figure out where you want to go. And I think that's where we play a role, in that trying to work with the clients to help them, develop a direction and a strategy of where they want to go, so that when they do access professional services, they're targeted, they know what they want, and they can, and they can get there efficiently. Yeah.
I think you've just answered my next question, which is why, is engaging with the Rural Financial Counselling Service a part of being a smart farm business operator? Why is it so essential to have this extra service at the table?
I think in a lot of cases we can be a sounding board, and if in nothing less, just a reassurance that somebody's on the right track, or we can provide sort of a bit of a critical analysis and the what ifs, but what if this happens and what if that happens, and it's
scenario planning.
Yeah, and it's that sort of and we've got a big network of counsellors. I started back with the service in early 2020, just before COVID hit. And it was really, I thought it'd be a very difficult time to, without that face-to-face interaction. But one thing I did realise is that it connected us as a counselling service a lot more. All of a sudden we were doing, virtual meetings, Teams and Zoom meetings, and the sharing of information amongst the counsellors themselves just went to another level. So
someone might ring you for a problem, but that Susan in Dubbo has the answer, or has had a similar client before, and there can be confidential learnings, anonymous learnings, passed over to the next counsellor.
Yeah, we sort of have that brains trust now, and we access it. I ring other counsellors and say, what do you, have you had a situation? What do you think about this? Is this the right way to go about it? And and through that, it's really, you sort of, you might have your local rural financial counsellor, but they're tapped into a much broader network of people with other skills in other areas, and it's a really
One thing I've learned from being in touch with your counsellors is 1, how qualified, 2, how connected, and 3, how much you care, and that's a really wonderful thing to see as an outsider looking in. I mean, I grew up on a farm. We've had transition from selling one farm, moving to new farms, but we also had transition in seeing, as my parents age, the succession without kids going home on the farm can be quite difficult. So I love how the services and the people involved in your business really helps people make big decisions at difficult times.
Yeah, and I think we've got that flexibility. We can work with people in different industries at different stages of their business. We can work with people just getting into agriculture and wanting to expand and grow, and helping them plan through that process. And at the other end, like you said, we're dealing with people who are probably exiting the industry and how to go about that. And so there's a whole broad spectrum of
exiting something you only do once. So
that's
like you
it.
Can learn from your mistakes. You have to leverage someone who's seen it done before.
That's it. And it's I think it's also just comforting to for people to sort of have us there as a support through that process. I mean, some of our core functions still exist with that hardship aspect of we provide a primary function in the Farm Debt Mediation Act, helping support farmers through that process. So that's probably one end of the spectrum, and the other end is that sort of working with people for future planning.
So what's farm debt mediation?
So Farm Debt Mediation Act, it's a legislated process in New South Wales. I think each state has its own version, but in New South Wales, it's sort of administered through the Rural Assistance Authority in Orange, and the Rural Financial Counselling Service is fairly integrally linked into that process. So we provide information support for farmers in that process, and it provides an opportunity for people to enter into mediation on their debt agreements to reach an outcome. And because of it, it's a legislated process. It provides protection and rights for farmers in that, going through that. Yeah,
it's not a straight foreclosure. It's a process of trying to do something about it before you get to that point.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think from the early days of where the Rural Financial Counselling Service started, probably in that early to mid 80s, as Bob mentioned, the counselling service sort of played that role, and then sort of it developed over time, and now we're sort of linked to that process. Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Now, I'd encourage anyone listening to add questions to the chat. I can see a couple coming in here, and I thought I would kick off with the first one in the chat, which is it's from someone who has a small business, but it's ag related. It's not an actual farm, and they're not a farmer, and they're asking, would you still be able to work with them?
Yeah, we can still work with farm-related business, support industries. It's it's a space where we're probably more involved in the planning, developing sort of options, and just generally working with sort of future direction, and also always looking at opportunities. If there's a few grants out there, it's harder in that industry, in that space to access sort of funding. It's more targeted towards prime production enterprises. But yeah, look, we're always on the hunt for an opportunity for those.
So like a contractor
Yeah,
sprayer, a business that supports farming.
Yeah.
Is there anyone that you wouldn't be able to work with? Is there an eligibility checklist?
Yeah, there is an eligibility checklist. I think, I think if you were part of a corporate structure, or if you could demonstrate that you had a lot of financial capacity to sort of add the sort of service that we provide through a professional, consultant or someone like that, then yes, there's sort of limitations. We are still, limited in the number of people we can help. So we do try to target, focus our attention on those people that
really need it.
But
what about I've got here. I'm a service provider. I have a client who could really do with your help.
Yeah.
How can I refer them, or can I give you their number to call them?
Yeah, look, it is one of those situations. Like we expect that if it's if your accountant or your solicitor, that they already have that relationship with them. So if they, more often than not, we'll give them our number and say tell them to give us a call. But in certain circumstances, yes, we will reach out to people if the need is there.
That's excellent.
Yeah.
What advice, and this is not one of the questions from the chat, but what advice would you have for someone who's listening who is thinking, I really want my partner, my parents to go down this path? How do I convince them? Is there a strategy that you found has worked well for people?
Connecting other members of the family. Look, I mean, I've used that example before of just leaving the number on the kitchen table or something like that. We will, more often than not, I mean, one of the families that I work with recently, I've been working with the parents for a long time, and we've sort of we've just sort of achieved a few goals working with them. But now they have a son who's gone out on his own, and he's always sort of been part of that family discussion. But now I'm working with him in an individual capacity in his own business. So there's that sort of intergenerational client, leading into other clients that we're starting to see now, which is really great, because we sort of, that does tend to tie things together so that you can, possibly be in a better position to facilitate family discussion and that around that. Yeah.
I could see people texting the link to this chat and the link to the case studies to the family WhatsApp group or the family text message group, and just saying, dropping it in there.
And I think because it's such an informal process, we really like to try and get to know clients, take time to understand their business, understand their family. We're pretty well positioned to sort of have those conversations, and then sometimes it takes time. You might not want to jump to that position too quickly if people don't feel ready, and more often than not, they'll lead the process and they'll say, I think we need to start thinking about this, and that's when we can say, okay, well, let's look at some options, and let's look at some strategies around how you approach and how you enter into that process.
Another question here is, can you help us talk to the bank, or can you deal with them directly? And I know when I was borrowing money for the exchange, I took my accountant, this 6'5" man, to my meetings with the bank, and let him answer the questions about. I just found that that I was going to get a better outcome if I had someone beside me who was as confident as I was that my idea was going to work. Do you go to the bank?
Yeah, look, we'll have meetings with clients and their bank manager. We'll help clients prepare for bank reviews or finance applications and help them compile the information that they need. And in a lot of cases, yeah, we will liaise with bank managers, and it's
such a worthwhile service.
Yeah, it's
incredible.
It's a pretty sort of it's pretty diverse, and there's a lot of scope for. I guess financial counselling is pretty broad in its sense, in a sense that if it's finance related and it's not the provision of advice, then we're most likely going to be able to help you. So.
But it's so unique because you deal with the human elements when it comes to running a business, which one might not expect that to be part of a financial counselling and government service. It's just so unique.
Yeah, and I think it's like, you do see accountants and and solicitors, and they have really strong connections to their clients over a long period of time, and I guess we're no different to that. The people that we work with, and I guess ideally, if we're doing our job really well, we get to a point where they don't need us, and that's the best outcome for us, is that people sort of have the confidence to go away and say, well, I'm not going to need to talk to you anymore, but I'll come back if I've got any questions. And that's a really good outcome for us.
Absolutely. I've got a few more questions, just the last ones. How long do you work with for clients? Is it a fixed time? Do you meet once a week? Is it all set?
It's very flexible. We can, in the early stages, when there's sort of, when we're getting into things, we can have regular meetings and have a lot of interaction. And then as we go on and we've sort of, targeted a few goals, that might be debt restructure or accessing government assistance, that interaction might slow down, and it might be just a quarterly checkup to say, how are you going? Is everything, do you want to catch up? Are you is everything tracking well? And then at some point, you hope that your services aren't needed.
I've got a good one up the top here.
Yeah.
Do the Rural Financial Counselling Service have many interactions with farmers who are not in financial difficulty? So are there ways you can add value to a business that is viable or profitable?
Yeah, I think that we do deal with businesses that are viable and profitable, but I guess there's part of our function is also to deal with hardship, but people who might be at risk of financial hardship. And I guess when we talk about succession planning, that lack of succession planning is a real risk to that farming operation, if left unattended or. So that client might be necessarily fairly financially stable, but there's risks. There's storm clouds on the horizon, and they're the sorts of people that we want to talk to and we want to interact with and get in front of.
So to throw back to that example you gave earlier, there could be a farmer with 10,000 acres, low debt, but no succession plan, and everyone can see that with no succession plan, they are at risk of hardship.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a risk there of that, that farming family, not being able to continue on the family farm that's been, as in Bob's sort of example, been owned in the family for 100 years. Without that sort of planning, without that future direction, that's at risk, and that's a really sort of difficult thing for families if they, when that happens as well.
Or two other examples. This week we've travelled to the North Coast for our future webinars, which is on ag tech and on the farm business resilience coaching program. And one viable business, blackberries, blueberries and raspberries, one of the risks to their business that could cause financial hardship is actually the varroa mite. And they've got bee boxes on their farm. So the interaction with the DPI, the coaches and the Rural Financial Counselling Service to say, what if scenarios, and what does that mean for us financially?
Yeah, we deal with apiarists as well, and yeah, it's a really challenging, difficult time. Has been for the last 12 months, but recent outbreaks down in sort of areas of the Riverina, and it's a really sort of hard time for that industry, but the flow on effect to other industries is enormous. We've got clients that do pollination services, not just for maybe almonds, but then they'll go to cherries and stone fruit, and
They're a service business within the ag sector
within the
that
ag.
you help.
Yes,
Yeah.
so and it's pretty. It's more extensive than I first realised when you start talking to these guys about what support service they provide to a whole range of other ag industries.
Last question before I ask how people can contact the RFCS. How can you help families who need your service but are stuck in a communication breakdown?
Look, I think that in that situation, we always try to connect with the primary person of the enterprise, and through working through business analysis and business planning, a lot of the time you will find that those people who might not be ready or might not be willing to engage in the process, over a period of time working with them, they do see the benefit of entering into that. And I think one of our advantages is also the cost as well. Like we're free service, so we can take the time to work through some of those options before they go and talk to their solicitor, before they go and have a chat to their accountant, so that they've got a bit of direction when they go. Yep. And I think that makes a huge difference, rather than turning up and sort of just saying, well, we just really don't know what we want to happen. Yeah.
I've got another one that's come in from a farmer in Mendooran, and I think this one's important. I said last question, but this one's important. Yeah. Do RFCS counsellors have training in the area of mental health? And if they identify a situation where the client is at risk, how do they manage that situation?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I'm not. All of our counsellors are here in Dubbo today, doing the RAMPS mental health training course of first aid for rural mental health, and it helps us identify when people are struggling, and allows us to sort of provide referrals and contacts as well within that mental health space, so that I think also the fact that we're a confidential service gives people that level of comfort to go out and seek that support. It's a really challenging part of our role, that we're not trained social or family counsellors, but we are a really important part of that referral process to those support services. Yeah.
Gosh, that must be a really difficult part of your role.
I think that's probably numbers are easy to work with, but that human element when people are stressed and worried about the future, that's probably a really challenging part of the role.
It's also one of the reasons why the RFCS is so important, that there's 70 humans in this organisation. It can't be replaced by a Service New South Wales bot.
Well, I think it goes back to what you said about people genuinely care. All the rural financial counsellors that I've worked with over the years, I think that's been the underlying thing, that it's an industry that you get into because you want to help people, and you have that you have that interest in the beginning. So it's a good gig.
Yeah. Tell me, how do people reach out to the RFCS?
Look, it's probably just a matter of calling, making a phone call.
What's the number?
I knew you were going to ask this, and that's why I've written it on my hand. It's 1-800 319 458. Yeah, and that you'll speak to somebody. One of our it's a rotating desk of counsellors and their support staff, and they'll put you in touch with the person who's nearest to you, or they'll get pass on a message, and that person will reach out to you.
Incredible. Dave, time has absolutely flown. Yeah. This has been one of our best sessions to hear from you, the authentic person behind the service that is offered for free. It's such an important time for farmers to know that this is available. And I'm so grateful that you've spent this time with us today. Thank you.
Thanks for having us. It's been great. Yeah.
And today wraps up the first part of this webinar series for the Smart Farm Business Resilience Program. We are heading to another 2 webinars in October, and those will focus on ag tech and the Farm Business Resilience Coaching Program. Please keep an eye out on social channels, and also we will send you a link if you've registered for this one to the next 2 webinars. And we look forward to bringing you more information about how smart farmers are accessing professional business services. Thank you.